My name is Nina, and on the 14th day of my silent standoff with Leo, I crossed half of China to see him. It was his 20th birthday. The gift in my arms, a sleek silver laptop, felt like a block of ice against my chest, its weight a tangible measure of 6 months of my life. Weekend tutoring sessions, skipped meals, and a constant low-grade exhaustion I'd learned to ignore. My body ached from a 40-hour hard-seat train journey, a punishing trek from my provincial university in the south to the glittering, daunting metropolis where Leo now resided. Every jolt of the carriage, every cramp in my back had been a silent mantra for Leo. I stood under a buzzing streetlight near the sprawling sports field of P University, the cold seeping through my thin jacket. Nerves twisted my stomach into knots. I imagined his face when he saw me. It would be, as always, an impassive mask. A slight, almost imperceptible nod in my direction. A single flat word, Nina. That was just him. My brilliant, unreadable Leo. A boy sculpted from marble and moonlight, who seemed to function on a different, colder frequency than the rest of the warm, messy world. Our argument replayed in my mind, simple and devastating. It was Qixi Festival, Chinese Valentine's Day. My roommate, Chloe, had just gone public with her boyfriend. My social media feed was a flood of her joyful hand-holding photos, showered with congratulations. In a moment of weak, yearning folly, I'd screenshotted one and sent it to Leo. After 3 years, I'd typed, trying to sound playful, I might be the only girl on earth who's never held her boyfriend's hand. His reply came an hour later. A single character. Oh. That was it. The dam of my patience, already strained thin by years of one-sided warmth, finally broke. I didn't send another message. For 14 days my phone was a silent, accusing brick. And he, true to form, did not reach out. Not once. In the end, it was I who broke, who convinced myself once more of all the old excuses. His genius, his peculiarities, the love I was certain lay buried beneath the permafrost of his demeanor. I boarded the train with a desperate hope, a belief that seeing me, this grand, foolish gesture, would thaw something. Then I saw them. Through the gauzy halo of the distant lights I saw Leo. And he wasn't alone. A girl with a high, swinging ponytail, dressed in sleek athletic wear, was walking beside him. She was talking, her hands animated, her face tipped up towards his. And Leo, my breath hitched. I didn't recognize the expression on his face. It was relaxed, his mouth softened from its usual severe line. The girl said something and he reached out, his fingers gently tugging the end of her ponytail. She mock-pouted, swatting his hand away, and he smiled. A real, easy smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. A smile I had never been able to elicit. They were under a lamp post now, 2 beautiful, brilliant young people bathed in golden light. A scene of perfect, effortless connection. It looked like a movie still. My heart, already a fragile thing, began a frantic, sickening beat against my ribs. The foundation of our argument crumbled into dust. Leo's idiosyncrasy, his pathological aversion to touch, the reason I'd denied myself so much, the reason I'd made endless allowances, it seemed to vanish around this girl. A motorcycle roared past on the road beside them, and in one fluid, instinctive motion, Leo's hand shot out. He pulled the girl behind him, shielding her. And he held her hand. Not a fleeting touch, but a firm, protective grasp. The disconnect was so violent it felt physical. I swayed on my feet, the gift box digging into my arms. At that moment Leo looked up. His eyes met mine across the distance. There was no shock on his face. No guilt. Just a slight pause, a blink, as if processing an unexpected variable in a complex equation. Then he started walking toward me, his long, unhurried strides eating up the pavement. The girl, Fiona, I would learn, called out, "Hey!" and grabbed the sleeve of his jacket. "Leo, why are you running off all of a sudden?" He didn't shake her off. He let her cling to his sleeve as he approached me, a king with his consort. He stopped in front of me, looking down from his impossible height. The soft light I had once thought romantic now felt clinical, exposing every frayed edge of my being. "Why are you here?" he asked. His voice was the same, cool, precise. I fought to keep my own voice steady, to paste on a smile that felt like a crack in porcelain. "I came to wish you a happy birthday, Leo." I held out the carefully wrapped box. "For you." His hand moved to take it. But Fiona, who had been watching with bright, curious eyes, suddenly gasped. "Oh no." Leo, our dinner reservation. It's about to expire. We have to go now. She tugged on his arm, the movement jerking him forward a step, interrupting the transfer of the gift. Leo stopped, looked from her to me, a faint crease between his brows. What are you standing there for? He said, his tone implying I was being obtuse. Come on. My feet moved of their own volition. I trailed behind them, a ghost in my own life, the unopened gift heavy in my hands. The image of his fingers wrapped around hers was seared onto the back of my eyelids. In the taxi I was relegated to the front seat, a spectator. In the back, Fiona's voice was a constant cheerful stream. She talked about lab protocols, a conference, a professor's latest paper, a world of acronyms and ambitions that was utterly foreign to me. Leo responded in low, engaged tones. The atmosphere between them was a bubble of shared understanding, a language I didn't speak. I remembered, with a pang that was almost nausea, the early days of our relationship. I too used to share everything with Leo. The funny shape of a cloud, the stray cat by my dorm, a song I couldn't get out of my head. I chattered into the void, met with silence or, at best, a distant until one day mid-sentence about a particularly adorable kitten he had interrupted. Nina, do you really have so much free time every day? The humiliation had been swift and total. I never offered him a piece of my mundane world again. I never knew he was capable of listening to someone else's trivialities with such apparent interest. My grip on the gift bag tightened, the thin handles cutting into my palm. The taxi driver, a middle-aged man with a kind face, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. My eyes, I knew, were shining with unshed tears. He chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. Young man, he said to Leo, don't just focus on chatting with your girlfriend. Your little sister here is about to cry from being left out. The bubble in the back seat popped. An awful, exposing silence filled the car. I hurriedly wiped at my eyes, a flush of hot shame creeping up my neck. A moment later, Fiona's light laugh tinkled through the tension. Oh, I'm so sorry. I almost forgot you were there. She leaned forward slightly, her smile bright and sharp. I'm Fiona. Leo's junior. Just 1 year behind, but I skipped a grade, so we're both grad students in the same lab now. Probably do our PhDs together too if all goes well. Her eyes flicked over me, taking in my worn shoes, my provincial-style coat. And you are? Which school? Who's your advisor? How many publications? Leo's never mentioned you. The smile never left her face, but it had transformed. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated mockery. So this was Fiona. My face burned. I had shamefully lurked on P University's forums. Leo was a minor celebrity there. Posts about the materials science prodigy were common. Since he never shared his life with me, it was my only window. Fiona's name was often paired with his. They were the department's golden duo. I'd seen a photo from a national competition. The two of them standing on the highest podium, holding a trophy between them, grinning with unrestrained triumph. The jealousy I'd felt then was a quiet, secret burn. Now it was a wildfire. The wind howled outside the taxi window. Leo said nothing. He offered no defense, no clarification. He simply allowed Fiona's provocation to hang in the air, a test I was clearly failing. Leo's girlfriend, I said, the word tasting like ash. Fiona's eyebrows rose in theatrical surprise. Really? She drew the word out, then looked at Leo as if waiting for him to correct a joke. He remained silent, gazing out the window. The restaurant was a private, hushed place specializing in delicate Fujian cuisine. The prices on the menu made my blood run cold. Fiona, clearly in her element, took charge. Buddha jumps over the wall, drunken chicken, stuffed tofu, she said to the waiter with an air of casual authority. Leo loves these. Did he? I didn't know. The Leo the first knew, the boy from my hometown, was a child of simple means. Our dates had been at street-side noodle stalls or on a splurge, a hot pot buffet. Fujian cuisine? I'd never heard him mention it. As the waiter turned to leave, Leo spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet. Add a dish of Chongqing spicy chicken. Fiona turned to him, a playful frown on her face. Leo, since when do you eat spicy food? You always say it's overwhelming. Leo took a slow sip of his tea, his eyes meeting mine for a fleeting second over the rim of the cup. He didn't answer Fiona. Only I knew. The one who loved violent, numbing spice wasn't him. It was me. A small, pathetic spark of hope flickered in my chest. He remembered. He saw me. This was his awkward, Leo-esque way of acknowledging me. The spark was immediately doused by the reality of the table. Fiona on his left, me on his right, an ocean of unspoken history and present betrayal between us. The food arrived, exquisite and artful. I had no appetite. After 40 hours on a train, surviving on a single packet of crackers to save money, my body was a cavern of exhaustion. The clock ticked relentlessly toward midnight. Fiona clapped her hands softly. Waiters entered, pushing a magnificent 3-tiered cake. It was decorated with intricate fondant figures in lab coats. On the very top stood 2 figures, a young man and woman side by side. Fiona beamed. "Leo, happy 20th. She pointed to the top figures. "May we meet at the summit together." The air left my lungs. Because of the spicy chicken, a foolish part of me still hoped. I hoped he would reject the symbolism, hoped he would say something, anything to me. But he just looked at the cake, at the 2 little fondant people representing him and Fiona, and a faint, genuine smile touched his lips. "Thank you, Fiona," he said, and his voice was warm. He closed his eyes to make a wish, the candlelight dancing over his handsome, serene face. I had never seen him smile so much in one evening. Who was in his wish? The ordinary girl from his past, who had traveled 2,000 kilometers with a broken heart and a broken laptop. Or the brilliant girl beside him, who promised a shared future at the academic summit? The answer felt brutally clear. We were from different worlds, and the chasm between us was now on full, humiliating display. The candles were blown out, plunging us into momentary darkness. My hope extinguished with them. Fiona cheered and clapped. I followed suit, my applause a weak, hollow sound. Then Fiona cut a small piece of cake and, with a mischievous grin, smeared a bit of frosting on Leo's cheek. He didn't flinch. He didn't recoil. He just shook his head, a fond exasperation in his tone. "Stop messing around." "Oops, I've ruined the masterpiece." Fiona giggled. "To make it up to you, I have your real gift." Fiona produced a large, elegantly wrapped box. As she presented it to Leo, my stomach dropped. Instinctively, I pushed my own gift box further under the table with my foot. She tore the paper away. Inside, nestled in foam, was a brand new top-of-the-line laptop from the most prestigious brand. An exact mirror image of the one in my box. "Your old one is so slow and outdated, Leo," Fiona said breezily. "I got you this. Nothing too fancy in case your stubborn pride made you refuse. Just picked a capable one at random. You don't mind, do you?" The price tag I'd memorized flashed in my mind. 12,999 yuan. To afford its twin, I had tutored for 6 months. 2-hour bus rides each way every weekend, to a center that paid 10 yuan more per hour. Tolerating spoiled children, crafting lesson plans until midnight, all while keeping my grades high enough to maybe one day close the gap between us. The object that represented my blood, sweat, and deferred dreams was, to Fiona, something picked at random. My hands trembled under the table. Fiona's gaze slid to me, and her smile turned sweetly venomous. "Oh, we haven't seen what Nina was it? Has gotten for you, Leo." Before I could react, she leaned past Leo and reached under the table, her fingers closing around the handle of my gift bag. "No, don't." I lunged forward, but it was too late. A tangle of arms, a sharp tug, and the box slipped from the bag. It fell to the hard restaurant floor with a sickening hollow crunch. Time slowed. I stared at the box on the ground, a hairline fracture visible on the cardboard. "Oops," Fiona said, her voice devoid of any real regret. "Clumsy me." I dropped to my knees, my heart hammering. With shaking hands, I opened the box. The beautiful, silver laptop inside now had a deep dent in its corner. The screen, when I lifted it, was a spiderweb of cracks radiating from the point of impact. I pressed the power button. Nothing. Not a flicker, not a hum. Just dead, black glass reflecting my shattered expression. Leo knelt beside me. "Nina." For the first time that night, I heard something other than calm detachment in his voice. It was a thread of guilt. It was the thread that finally snapped the last tie holding me together. I raised a hand and pushed him away, the motion numb and slow. I carefully placed the destroyed laptop back in its broken box, gathered the pieces of wrapping paper and stood up. Then, without a word, I turned and walked out of the private room. Once in the corridor, I broke into a run. I heard his chair scrape behind me, his footsteps. "Nina," he called, his voice sharp with something like alarm. But I was already flying through the ornate restaurant, past startled waiters, and out into the cold, liberating darkness of the night. The cold night air hit me like a slap, sharp and cleansing. I ran blindly, the broken box clutched to my chest like a wounded animal. The expensive, quiet street was a blur of indistinct lights and shadow. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from the restaurant, from Fiona's triumphant smile, from Leo's devastating indifference. "Nina. Stop." His voice was closer than I expected. A hand closed around my upper arm, pulling me to a halt with a force that was both firm and, for Leo, strangely desperate. I stumbled, whirling around to face him. He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling, a lock of his usually perfect hair falling over his forehead. In the amber glow of a street lamp I saw it clearly: shock. Pure, uncalculated shock in his wide, dark eyes. He was still holding my arm. His touch, which I had yearned for, dreamed of for years, now felt like a brand. I tried to wrench free, but his grip tightened. "Let go of me. Nina, just wait." His voice was unsteady. He seemed at a loss, his analytical mind clearly unable to process this raw, messy outburst. His other hand came up, his cool fingers brushing my cheek. They came away wet. I was crying, great silent tears that streamed down my face without my permission. I hadn't even felt them start. He stared at the moisture on his fingertips as if it were a foreign substance. Then, his face contorted with a panic I had never seen before. "Don't," he whispered, the command soft and fractured. "Nina, please don't cry." He kept repeating my name, a broken mantra, as he tried ineptly to wipe my tears with his thumb, only succeeding in smearing them. The tenderness of the gesture, arriving 3 years too late and under entirely wrong circumstances, was the final cruel twist of the knife. He couldn't stem the flood, so he did the unthinkable. He pulled me into his arms. My body went rigid. This was the embrace I had fantasized about during cold nights, after difficult days when I needed comfort. Now encased in it, I felt nothing but a hollow, echoing cold. His arms were tight around me, his chin resting on the top of my head. "Please don't cry," he murmured into my hair, his voice muffled. I stood there, weeping silently in the arms of the boy I had loved since I was 16, and realized with perfect agonizing clarity that I had become an exception to his rules. But the tragedy was, I was no longer the only exception. Somewhere along the way, in a world I wasn't part of, he had already rewritten his code for Fiona. The tears began to slow, replaced by a chilling numbness. I gathered the shattered pieces of my composure. When I spoke, my own voice surprised me with its flat steadiness. "Leo." He loosened his hold just enough to look down at me, his eyes searching mine, still clouded with confusion and that unfamiliar panic. "Let's break up." He froze. For a long moment he simply stared, processing the words as if they were in a language he hadn't yet mastered. Then his brows drew together. "Is that necessary?" he asked, and the genuine perplexity in his tone was more insulting than anger would have been. Emotions flickered in his eyes, frustration, a hint of impatience. Finally he sighed, a sound of profound weariness, as if I were a particularly stubborn problem he'd been forced to resolve. "Nina, do you need me to coax you?" He said the words awkwardly, like pronouncing an unfamiliar technical term. "Since when have you become so childish?" The numbness cracked and white-hot anger shot through the fissures. "Childish? Between Fiona and me," he continued, his tone dropping back into its familiar explanatory cadence, the one he used for complex concepts. "It's not what you think. You wouldn't understand, so it's better if you don't make a fuss." There was the ultimate dismissal. My feelings, my pain were just a fuss. The intricate, intimate reality he shared with Fiona was beyond the comprehension of an ordinary person like me. I was supposed to nod, to swallow my hurt like I always had, and retreat quietly into my assigned corner, a well-behaved pet. A strange, airy sensation filled my chest. I felt like laughing. Instead, a final hot tear escaped and traced a path to the corner of my mouth. A surge of pure, undiluted fury shot through me. My hand flew up, instinct driving me to slap the condescension off his beautiful, stupid face. But at the last second, as my hand cut through the air towards his cheek, all my strength deserted me. My movement faltered. My fingernails merely grazed his skin, leaving 3 faint pink lines across his cheekbone. He flinched more in surprise than pain. His hand rose slowly to touch the marks. He looked at his fingers, then back at me, his head tilted. "Does that make you feel better?" he asked, the question clinical, as if gathering data on an emotional response. Before I could even form a reply, a shrill voice pierced the night. "Leo." Fiona came running out of the restaurant, her face a mask of dramatic concern. When her eyes landed on the scratches on Leo's cheek, that concern twisted into something vicious. She positioned herself squarely between us, a tiny, furious shield. "If you have a problem with me, you come at me," she spat, her finger jabbing in my direction. "How dare you lay a hand on him?" Not content with yelling, she took 2 swift steps forward, her own hand arcing through the air towards my face. I reacted on pure instinct, throwing my arm up to block the blow. Our forearms connected. I barely felt the impact, but Fiona let out a sharp, theatrical cry. "Ah!" She stumbled backward, her ankle twisting awkwardly, and collapsed onto the damp pavement, clutching her leg. "My ankle." "Nina, I didn't," I started, my voice a confused stammer. "Enough." Leo's voice cut through mine, cold and final, brimming with anger I had never heard directed at me before. He was looking at Fiona crumpled on the ground, then at the scratches on his face, his jaw tight. He turned his gaze to me, and the last vestiges of any warmth or confusion were gone. His eyes were chips of black ice. "You should understand," he said, each word measured and freezing. "What happens between you and me has nothing to do with a third party. You've truly disappointed me." Any desire to explain, to defend myself, evaporated. It was useless. I stood frozen, watching as he bent down and, with a gentleness that was a physical blow, gathered the weeping Fiona into his arms. She immediately buried her face in his neck, her arms winding around him. He turned to leave, but not before casting one last look over his shoulder at me. It wasn't the flat, emotionless look I was used to. It was cold, contemptuous, full of a profound and final dismissal. He was looking at a stranger. A troublesome, violent stranger. He who showed emotion so rarely had now shown anger, panic, and contempt. All because of her. They moved away, 2 tangled shadows merging into one under the streetlights. I was left alone, the cold cement of the sidewalk leaching the last warmth from my body. A memory, unbidden and brutal, assaulted me. It was after our college entrance exams, a trip we'd taken. I'd spiked a fever of 40 degrees. Shivering and delirious, I'd begged him to take me to the hospital. He'd hesitated, his aversion to the chaos of hospitals and ambulances a palpable wall between us. After what felt like an eternity, he'd called. When the ambulance got stuck in traffic, he'd simply sat beside me, silent and stiff, while I burned. By the time we arrived, the doctor said I was borderline pneumonia. My best friend Maya had been furious. "He doesn't love you, Nina," she'd raged. "If he loved you, he'd move heaven and earth. He'd carry you on his back if he had to." I'd defended him as always. "It's just how he is. He doesn't do well with illness, with chaos. It doesn't mean he doesn't care." Now, watching him carry Fiona without a second thought, that long-ago bullet of truth finally found its mark years later and struck me right between the eyes. I had to admit it. The painful, humiliating truth I had fought for years. It wasn't that he couldn't love. He just couldn't be bothered to love me. I spent the night curled on a hard plastic seat in the cavernous, echoing train station, the broken laptop box on my lap like a tombstone. I couldn't afford a hotel. The cold was deep and bone-chilling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. His hand in hers, the fondant figures, the shattered screen. I booked the earliest, cheapest ticket back south for the next morning. The journey was a blur of aching loneliness and hollow exhaustion. When I finally stumbled back into my dorm room 2 days later, a wave of dizziness hit me. My body, pushed far beyond its limits, gave up. I collapsed. I woke up to the sterile white light of a hospital room and the swollen, red-rimmed eyes of Maya. She looked like she'd been crying for days. "You idiot," she whispered, her voice hoarse as she clutched my hand. I told you that emotionally stunted iceberg was no good for you." Maya had never liked Leo. She called me a love-blind fool, and him a high-functioning narcissist. In the past, I would have argued passionately, listing his hidden virtues, his quiet ways of caring. Now I lacked the strength and, more importantly, the conviction. The evidence was in. The jury of my own heart had returned a verdict. I looked at her worried face and felt a fresh wave of tears, these born of shame and regret. Maya, I croaked, my throat sore. I should have listened to you. As if on cue, my phone charging on the bedside table rang. It was the special ringtone I'd set for Leo last year on my birthday. He'd asked me what I wanted and I, feeling brave, had begged him to sing for me. He'd sighed, rolled his eyes, but in a low off-key monotone had hummed the tune to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I'd recorded it and set it as his exclusive ringtone. He'd looked at me with an expression I'd mistaken for fond indulgence. Now the childish melody tinkled in the quiet room, a cruel parody of a happiness that had never been real. Maya made a move to grab the phone and hurl it against the wall. I shook my head weakly. Don't. I picked it up. The screen showed his name. I let it ring until it stopped. Then, methodically, with trembling fingers, I went into my contacts. I blocked his number. Opening WeChat, I saw the red notification dots on his avatar. A rare sight. He never initiated chat. There were 3 messages. The first from the night before. Where are you? The second a few hours later. A photo. It was Fiona in a hospital bed, her left foot encased in a pristine white cast, propped up on pillows. She was giving a weak peace sign to the camera, a pout on her lips. The third message from this morning. Because of your impulsiveness, an innocent person got hurt. What happened between us? You shouldn't have dragged a third party into it. I stared at the screen. The green bubbles of my countless one-sided messages filled our history. These 3 white bubbles from him, the first real conversation he'd started in years, were not questions about my well-being, not apologies, not explanations. They were accusations. They were for her. The dam broke again. Silent, heaving sobs shook my body. Tears fell onto the phone screen, distorting his words. Leo and I had met in the chaotic hallways of middle school. He was the quiet, intimidating genius. I was the earnest, slightly clumsy girl who sat behind him. He wasn't just my first love. He was my benchmark for excellence, my inspiration. When I failed a math test, he'd slid a page of corrections onto my desk without a word. Before the college entrance exams, the genius who never did homework had hand-copied an entire notebook of his personal study methods and formulas for me. I'd held that notebook, my heart pounding as if it held state secrets. I'd asked, my voice casual to hide the tremor, Leo, you put so much work into this. Do you like me or something? The silence that followed had felt like an eternity. Then he'd turned from the window, his face illuminated by the evening sun. Emin, he'd said as casually as commenting on the weather. I like you. That was it. I became the girlfriend of a genius. I endured the whispers, the disbelief, the constant comparisons. I worked harder than I ever had, chasing his distant light. In a year, I dragged my grades from a middling provincial university level to a 211-tier school. I was fighting for a graduate school recommendation, a chance however slim, to get into P University. To be near him. I had run so far for so long, believing the finish line was his heart. No one told me the finish line could move. No one told me the person you're running toward could turn and run in a different direction with someone else. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. 1,000 responses fought in my mind. Long explanations, furious diatribes, wounded pleas. I typed out paragraphs, then deleted them one by one. What was the point? Finally, I typed one last message, my fingers steady now with a cold, clear resolve. Leo, out of the kindness of my heart, let me explain something to a genius who doesn't understand human relationships. What you're doing is called emotional cheating. I sent it. Then, without hesitation, I opened his profile. I clicked the 3 dots. Block contact. A warning popped up. Once you block this contact, you will no longer receive messages from them. My finger hovered for only a second over the confirmation button. Then I pressed it. His avatar, his name, his chat history, all vanished from my list. It felt like cutting out a piece of my own history, my own identity. A wave of grief, so profound it was physical, washed over me. I collapsed back into Maya's waiting arms and cried until I had no tears left. The breakup was a slow, grinding torture. For weeks my world was gray. I'd be in the library and a sudden memory, his focused profile as he studied, the way he'd sometimes tap his pen, would ambush me, leaving me breathless with pain. I'd see a couple holding hands in the cafeteria and feel a hollow ache. but a stubborn seed had been planted in the ruins of my heart. A seed of righteous anger. From beginning to end I had done nothing wrong. I had loved faithfully, made endless allowances and made a grand, foolish gesture of reconciliation. I was blameless. And someone who is blameless should not be eternally imprisoned by someone else's wrongdoing. I threw myself into my studies with a ferocity that startled my professors. I filled every waking moment with work, leaving no space for memories of Leo. Just when I thought I was finally finding my footing, building a new life without him, the past reached out and dragged me back in. It started subtly. A link from Maya with a grimace. "You need to see this." It was a post on P University's forum. A shipping post titled, "The Golden Duo of Material Science. When will our campus gods make it official?" It was filled with photos of Leo and Fiona, at award ceremonies, in the lab, laughing at campus events. The comments were a chorus of "so perfect" and "power couple goals." Then one comment buried deep stood out. "Wait, am I the only one who remembers? Didn't Leo have a girlfriend like years back in his hometown?" That single sentence was a match dropped in dry tinder. The replies exploded. "Huh, no way. Is Fiona the other woman? Don't spread rumors without evidence. Leo's a loner, always has been. I'm in his department. He's odd. But I've only ever seen him that close with Fiona." More photos were posted as proof of their exclusive bond. The comment about me was quickly deleted by the poster, likely fearing backlash, but the genie was out of the bottle. The discussion spilled onto other social media platforms. The narrative of the handsome, brilliant young genius and his equally brilliant, beautiful partner was too appealing. The vague rumor of a hometown girlfriend was painted as the obsessive fantasy of a jealous outsider. Then Fiona made her move. She posted a long, carefully worded statement. She clarified she was not and had never been a third party. Attached were two photos, one of her in the hospital bed with her cast, looking fragile and wronged. The other was a close-up of the faint but still visible scratches on Leo's cheek from that night. Her caption read, "For a long time, Leo has been subjected to unwanted and persistent attention from a certain individual, despite his clear discomfort. Recently, this individual followed him to our city on his birthday. After being rightly rejected, she became violent, assaulting Leo and, when I tried to intervene, pushing me and causing a fracture. Out of respect for their past acquaintance, Leo chose not to involve the authorities. We never expected kindness to be repaid with malicious slander. Ms. Nina, I hope you learn to behave with dignity." She had named me. She had twisted the entire narrative. I was no longer the betrayed girlfriend. I was the unhinged stalker. The internet, with its short attention span and appetite for drama, ate it up. My world turned upside down in hours. My social media was flooded with hateful messages. Strangers dug up my university, my department, even photos of me from old dormant accounts. My inbox was a sewer of vitriol. "Psycho. Ugly. Bitch. Get a life. You deserve to be alone." The worst was the summons to the dean's office. The air was thick with disapproval. The dean, a stern woman, spoke with measured politeness. "Miss Nina, the university does not wish to interfere in students' private lives. However, the negative attention this situation is bringing to our institution is significant. It's affecting our reputation." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "We understand you are a candidate for the Overseas Exchange Program to Meridia University. A decision on that is pending. It would be a shame if external distractions influenced that opportunity." The exchange program. My last best hope for a fresh start. Several professors, impressed by my recent work, had suggested I apply. I had, in a moment of post-breakup clarity, submitted my application just before the deadline. It was my ticket out, my path to a future defined by me, not by Leo. Now it was being dangled over my head like a carrot, contingent on my silence. On the dean's desk, her phone screen was face up. It was open to Fiona's social media. She had posted again. A new photo, her in what looked like a clinic, in 4-needle in her hand. And there, caught in the corner of the frame, was a slender, familiar male hand adjusting the drip tube. The caption, "With you here, even the bitterest medicine tastes sweet." The comments below were a festival of well-wishing for the couple. One stood out. "This is what real care looks like." Someone must be seething with envy. A cold, hard clarity settled over me. When I was sick, Leo's solution had been an ambulance stuck in traffic and silence. Now he was playing nurse. I looked away from the screen and met the dean's expectant gaze. I reached into my bag and took out my phone. I opened a folder I'd compiled during 3 sleepless nights, a digital tomb of my dead relationship. Screenshots of our early shy chats. Photos of us in high school awkward and smiling. A picture of the handwritten study notebook he'd made for me. Evidence of plane tickets for visits. Always me visiting him. Proof that for years, I was the publicly acknowledged girlfriend in his hometown world. It was the album I had once dreamed of showing at a wedding. Now it was my shield. "Professor," I said, my voice calm and firm, "you don't need to worry about the distraction anymore." I pressed send, posting the entire thread of evidence publicly, tagging the relevant university forums and hashtags. It was my truth laid bare against her lies. As I walked out of the office, my phone rang. It was an unknown number from City B. I answered. "Are you finished, Nina?" It was Leo's voice, laced with a deep, exhausted anger I had never heard before. "Delete the post. Now." Leo's voice, cold and commanding through the phone, didn't spark fear in me anymore. It ignited a quiet, steady flame of defiance. "Finished." I echoed, my own voice surprisingly level. "Because Fiona lied, I've been harassed online for a week. I get dirty looks in the cafeteria. Because Fiona lied, I was just in the dean's office, being politely threatened with the loss of my only way out of this mess. And you're calling to ask if I'm finished." There was a beat of silence on the other end. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly, the anger edged with something else. "You're going abroad? To Meridia? You never told me." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Leo, need I remind you? We broke up. My life is no longer your concern." He sighed, a long, weary sound that scraped down the line. "Nina, we are not broken up. There are complexities you are not aware of. Things I will explain in time. But now you need to delete that post. Fiona is not, she's not doing well." The chill that had been receding rushed back, colder and deeper than before. For 3 days I had been a target of a cyber mob, my character assassinated, my future jeopardized. He had said nothing, done nothing. But Fiona was not doing well, and suddenly he was on the phone issuing orders. So he did know how to use technology to intervene. He just chose not to for me. The last lingering filament of something, nostalgia, pity, leftover affection, snapped. "You and your complexities can go to hell," I said, my words clear and precise. I hung up before he could reply, my hands trembling not with sadness, but with a pure, cleansing rage. I sat in the silence of my dorm room for a long moment, the weight of his call settling on me. He wasn't asking. He was telling. He expected compliance. He still saw me as the girl who would always fold, who would always choose peace for the sake of his comfort. Not anymore. With deliberate movements, I opened my browser. I wasn't finished. If Fiona wasn't doing well, perhaps I could help her situation become a little more legally significant. I found the number for the police precinct in City B and placed a call, calmly reporting Fiona's online post as defamation, providing links and screenshots. I gave my statement, my voice unwavering. Let her see what real consequences felt like. The police report added a new, serious dimension to the online drama. Under the dual pressure of public scrutiny and official inquiry, Fiona was forced to retract her statement and delete the accusatory posts. But the internet never forgets. The screenshots of her lies, the photos of her and Leo playing the injured party, were now replicated everywhere. The backlash, swift and brutal, turned against her. The narrative flipped from poor, harassed genius duo to calculating liar and her enabler. Her university issued a terse statement saying they were looking into the matter. I should have felt vindicated. A part of me did. A small, fierce part that was learning to stand its ground. But a larger part was simply exhausted. I focused on preparing for the Meridia exchange, burying myself in language apps and cultural guides, trying to believe the storm was finally passing. Then the email arrived. It was from the International Programs Office. My application for the Meridia University exchange had been reconsidered. My spot was no longer available. No reason given beyond administrative review. I read it 3 times, the words swimming on the screen. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. I ran to the office, my heart hammering against my ribs. The administrator, a man who had once smiled encouragingly at my application, now avoided my eyes. "I'm sorry, Nina. It's the school's decision. These things happen." "What things?" I demanded, my voice tight. "My grades are above the requirement. My recommendations are strong." "What, administrative review?" He shook his head, shuffling papers on his desk. "I really can't say. It's out of my hands. It's getting late, we're about to close." He stood up, a clear dismissal. The office door shut firmly behind me, the sound final as a coffin lid. I stood in the hallway, the institutional fluorescent lights humming overhead. It was late autumn and a fine, chilly drizzle had begun to fall outside, blurring the world into gray smudges. I walked out of the building into the damp twilight, the email burning a hole in my pocket. The failure wasn't just academic. It felt like a revocation of my escape, a sentence to remain in the shadow of this scandal. Under a flickering streetlight at the edge of the courtyard, a figure leaned against a bike rack. Tall, shoulders slumped slightly against the damp. Even in the gloom I knew him instantly. Leo. My footsteps faltered. I considered turning around, walking the long way. But a stubborn anger straightened my spine. I would not run from him. Not anymore. As I drew level, he pushed off from the rack. His face was pale, shadows under his eyes. He looked older, worn. "Nina." His voice was hoarse. "Get lost," I said, not breaking stride. He moved with surprising speed, his hand closing around my wrist. His touch was cold, sending an instinctive shudder of revulsion through me. "Wait." I tried to yank my arm back, but his grip was like iron. "Let go of me, Leo." He ignored me, his gaze intense. "If you withdraw the lawsuit against Fiona, there might still be time. They might reinstate you." I froze. The lawsuit. The private defamation suit I'd filed after the police report, refusing Fiona's settlement offers. I'd wanted a court's judgment, a legal record of her lies. The pieces clicked together with an almost audible snap. The administrative review. The dean's vague warning. "Fiona," I said, the name a curse. "Her father did this, didn't he?" Leo's silence was confirmation enough. He didn't deny it. He just looked at me, his expression a conflicted mask. "I've already advised you. Withdraw the suit. I can speak to the people here. I can help fix this." A wild, humorless laugh burst from me. "You want to plead on my behalf? Won't your beloved Fiona be upset? I wouldn't want to come between such a devoted couple." He shook his head, a sharp, frustrated motion. "It's not like that. I won't be with Fiona. Just listen to me for once. Please." The word was a trigger. I saw a lifetime of listening to his monosyllables, his dismissals, his complexities. I saw him listening, rapt to Fiona's every word in the taxi. The tension that had been coiling in me for months, since the train, since the shattered laptop, since the online hell reached its breaking point. My free hand flew up, and this time there was no hesitation, no loss of strength. The slap connected with his cheek with a sharp, satisfying crack. His head snapped to the side. "Leo," I said, my voice trembling with the force of my conviction, "loving you was the biggest regret of my life." He stood very still, his face turned away. When he finally looked back, his cheek was flushed red, his eyes wide with a shock that went deeper than physical pain. He would never understand. The Leo the first fell for wasn't just the genius. It was the boy who'd silently confronted a bully picking on a younger student. It was the teenager who, on a rainy night, bought all the leftover vegetables from an old street vendor so she could go home. He'd been aloof, but there had been a core of quiet, principled kindness. That boy was gone. In his place was this compromised, calculating stranger, willing to watch my future burn to keep his own path smooth. "Withdraw the lawsuit?" I continued, the words ice. "Never. Do what you want. I believe the truth has a way of lasting." I turned to go. His hand shot out again, grabbing my arm, his fingers digging in. "Nina." His voice was sharp, almost frantic now. He seemed to realize belatedly that he had lost all leverage, all control. Revulsion, thick and choking, rose in my throat. "Don't make me disgusted by you, Leo." I didn't think. I just acted. I kicked back, my heel connecting hard with his shin. He grunted in pain, his grip loosening for a split second. It was enough. I ripped my arm free. I'm not the only one with a cleanliness obsession, I spat, not looking back. I find a man who's been touched by others dirty too. I heard him take a step, then stop. I didn't wait. I ran into the cold, cleansing rain, leaving him standing alone under the flickering light. I would never tell Leo that the day before he ambushed me, I had received a strange private message on the social media account I'd used to post my evidence. The username was a string of numbers. The message read, "Do you know why he puts up with her?" I'd ignored it, assuming it was another troll. But then another arrived. "Look up who her father is. You'll be surprised. A good father-in-law is half the battle. A bright future paved with someone else's work. If she chose me, I'd have more publications than I could count. Have you ever had something you worked for, something you bled for, taken by someone else?" "I have. Many times. We're both victims here." The tone was bitter, exhausted, and chillingly specific. It wasn't about romance. It was about academia, about access. A vague, sickening suspicion began to uncurl in my mind. I'd pushed it aside, not wanting to believe that even Leo's academic standing, the one thing I thought was unassailably his, might be compromised. But Leo's plea, his admission that Fiona's father was involved in sabotaging my exchange, gave the anonymous messages a terrifying credibility. That night, soaked and shivering but burning with a new purpose, I sat at my desk. I looked up Leo's research lab at P University. I found his supervisor, Professor Richard Vance. A distinguished name, a string of impressive credentials. I found a photo from a university event. He was a handsome man in his 50s with sharp features and gold-rimmed glasses. And the shape of his eyes, the curve of his smile, they held a faint, unmistakable echo of Fiona. My breath caught. Vance. Fiona's last name was Vance. The anonymous messages made terrible sense. When Leo caught me outside the office, some instinct had made me open the voice memo app on my phone and press record before I even saw him fully. The recording of him pleading with me to drop the lawsuit, of him not denying Fiona's father's involvement, now sat in my phone, a digital artifact of corruption. I opened the social media app again. There was a new message from the number string. "He won't let me graduate. He's blocking my dissertation. I have the data, the work is mine, but he says it's unpolished. He wants to give it to his golden boy. I'm on the roof. I don't think I want to do this anymore." A photo was attached. A view from a great height, shoes dangling over the edge of a rooftop, the city lights a blur far below. Panic, sharp and immediate, cut through my own misery. This wasn't just about me anymore. I typed back quickly, my fingers fumbling. "Don't. If you jump, it's over. They win. We are victims." "But who said victims have to just take it?" There was a long pause. "Then, who are you?" "Someone who is also tired of being stepped on," I replied. "My name is Nina. Talk to me. Not to the ground." An hour later, I was on a video call with a haggard, red-eyed young man named Joel. He was in his 6th year of a PhD that should have taken 4. He was brilliant, bitter, and had a hard drive full of evidence. Emails from Professor Vance pressuring him to add Leo's name to his papers, to share data, drafts of his own work later published under Leo and Fiona's names with minor changes, recordings of lab meetings where his ideas were dismissed only to be championed by Fiona later. "He's not a genius," Joel said, his voice flat. "He's a competent synthesizer with a photogenic face and the right connections. She's the gatekeeper. Her father is the kingdom. I'm just the serf who tills the land." My fight was no longer just personal. It was systemic. Leo's betrayal was part of a larger, uglier machine of privilege and exploitation. "My account has attention now because of the public drama," I said slowly, an idea forming. "It's the wrong kind of attention, but it's a spotlight. What if we used it? Not for gossip. For proof." Joel's exhausted eyes met mine on the screen. A spark, faint but definite, ignited in them. "You mean?" "I mean we go public. With everything. The academic fraud. The coercion. We package it with my story, not as a jealous ex, but as someone who got in the way of their polished narrative and saw the rot underneath." I took a deep breath. "We have the recording of Leo implicating Vance. We have your documents. We have the truth." It was a nuclear option. It would burn everything. Leo's reputation, Fiona's future, Vance's career. It might also incinerate what was left of my own privacy. But looking at Joel's desperate face, thinking of my revoked future, I knew there was no going back to silence. We're not just victims, I said, echoing my own words to him. We're witnesses. Together, over the next 48 hours, we crafted a thread. It was meticulous, forensic. It started with my personal story, the timeline of my relationship with Leo, the birthday disaster, the defamation, not as salacious gossip, but as the entry point to a deeper corruption. Then we pivoted. We introduced Professor Richard Vance. We showed Fiona's lineage. We presented Joel's evidence, side-by-side comparisons of documents, email chains, audio clips with transcripts. We ended with the clip of Leo's voice in the rain. If you withdraw the lawsuit, I can speak to the people here. The implication was clear. We titled it, The Price of a Golden Future, Academic Tyranny at P University. And then with a shared, steadying breath we posted it. The internet, which had feasted on the petty drama, now choked on the substantive scandal. The shift was seismic. This was no longer a he said she said between students. This was a serious allegation of academic misconduct, abuse of power and systemic corruption at a top-tier institution. The phrases were explosive: supervisor exploits students, academic fraud, weaponized nepotism. P University's response was swift and starkly different from their earlier hands-off approach. Within hours, a statement announced that Professor Richard Vance was suspended from all teaching and supervisory duties, pending a full, independent investigation. The news cycles exploded. My name and Joel's were everywhere, but now framed not as jilted lovers or disgruntled students, but as whistleblowers. My phone rang incessantly. Unknown numbers, journalists. I ignored them all. Except one. It was Leo. His name flashed on the screen over and over. Finally, I answered, putting it on speaker for Joel to hear. The voice that came through was unrecognizable. It was a raw, ragged scream of pure fury. Nina. How dare you? What have you done? I held the phone away from my ear, a cold calm settling over me. I told you the truth had a way of lasting, Leo. You've ruined everything. Everything I've worked for, he shrieked. The polished, controlled genius was gone, stripped bare to reveal a terrified, entitled core. No, I said softly, deadly calm. You did that when you chose to build your everything on someone else's work and on breaking someone else's heart. You're not a genius, Leo. You're a thief. And now everyone knows it. I hung up on his sputtering rage. Joel let out a long, shaky breath. It's done, he said. It was. The investigation was swift and merciless. Vance was ultimately stripped of his tenure and teaching credentials. The students in his lab were reassigned. All except one. Leo's name, once celebrated, was now toxic. The investigation revealed that of his 7 published papers, he had only been a substantive contributor to 3. The other 4 bore the clear mark of Joel's foundational work and Vance's coercive authorship practices. The campus prince became a pariah, a symbol of tainted achievement. He disappeared from P University shortly after. Rumors filtered back, he'd dropped out. Some said he'd taken a behind-the-scenes tech job, others that he'd gone back to our hometown, a fallen Icarus with melted wings. I didn't care enough to find out which was true. A week after the story broke, I received a new email from the International Programs Office. My spot in the Meridia University Exchange Program had been re-evaluated and was now reinstated. There were no apologies, just a list of logistical details. On the day I walked through security at the airport, my suitcase packed with a new life, I felt a strange sense of detachment. As I handed my passport to the officer, I thought I saw, far back in the crowded terminal, a tall, familiar figure standing still amidst the flow of people. I didn't turn for a second look. I didn't wonder if it was him. I stepped through the gate and I did not look back. I was finally moving toward a horizon I had drawn for myself. Meridia University was a world of glass, green lawns and brisk, unfamiliar air. The silence that first enveloped me wasn't the painful, lonely kind I'd left behind. It was a spacious, promising quiet, filled with the hum of new beginnings. Here I wasn't Leo's ex, or that girl from the scandal. I was just Nina, a graduate student in environmental engineering, quiet, diligent, and fiercely determined to prove my worth came from my own mind, not from proximity to a boy. The work was punishing, the concepts complex, but for the first time in years, my brain felt entirely my own. I wasn't straining to understand a universe built for a genius. I was building my own universe, brick by intellectual brick. I made friends. A girl from Sweden who loved hiking, a Canadian who made terrible but enthusiastic coffee. We complained about deadlines, celebrated small victories, and never once talked about broken hearts or shattered laptops. The ghost of Leo, which had haunted me for so long, began to fade in this bright foreign light, becoming less a present pain and more a distant, cautionary memory. Joel stayed in touch. Our bond, forged in the fire of mutual destruction, had cooled into a steady, supportive friendship. He'd been transferred to a new advisor, a rigorous but fair professor who saw the talent Vance had tried to suppress. With the shadow of exploitation lifted, Joel began to thrive. He'd send me snippets of his revised dissertation, ask for my thoughts on a data set, my environmental stats background offered a fresh perspective, and update me on the slow, grinding wheels of university bureaucracy as they finalized Vance's permanent dismissal. His messages were a lifeline to a part of my past I didn't want to forget, the part where I found my strength. They were also, gradually, something more. They were funny. He had a dry, self-deprecating wit that made me smile. He remembered the small things I mentioned, a tough lab, a missed home-cooked meal, and would check in days later. He was kind in a straightforward, unassuming way that felt utterly novel. When my exchange year ended, I faced a choice: return to my home university to complete my degree, or apply to stay at Meridia for a full master's program. The decision was surprisingly easy. I applied, was accepted, and threw myself into another 2 years of study. I was building a life, not waiting for one to start. During this time, Joel defended his PhD. He sent me a photo that night. He was in a slightly messy apartment, holding his dissertation, his eyes red-rimmed but shining with a triumph so profound it was palpable through the screen. "I did it," the message read. "I actually did it. I couldn't have gotten here without you. You gave me back my future." And then a second message, more hesitant. "If that future could ever include you, I'd be the luckiest man alive." I stared at the words, my heart doing a slow, unfamiliar flip. This wasn't the dizzying, painful intoxication of my love for Leo. This was quieter, warmer. It felt like coming home to a well-lit room after a long, cold journey. I didn't say yes immediately. We talked for hours over video calls, mapping out the distance, our ambitions, our fears. He was honest about his scars, the bitterness, the anxiety that sometimes crept in. I was honest about mine. There were no pedestals, no unattainable geniuses. There were just two people who had seen the worst of academic and personal betrayal and had helped each other crawl out of the wreckage. When I finally said yes, it felt less like a leap and more like a step onto solid, familiar ground. 2 years later, degree in hand and a job offer from a green tech startup in my home country, I decided to return. Joel's own path had diverged from academia. Together with a few of his similarly disillusioned and brilliant peers, he'd founded a small tech firm, Jiangzhou Tech, focusing on sustainable data solutions. It was struggling, hopeful, and utterly his. We were coming back to a new chapter, and we were coming back together. This time we were also planning a wedding. "No way, Nina. You're really marrying him? That Joel? The one who wanted to jump off a roof?" Maya's shriek of delight through the phone was so loud I had to hold it away from my ear. In the driver's seat of our rental car, Joel winced playfully, a grin spreading across his face. I laughed, the sound easy and free. "He has a name, Maya. Jiangzhou Tech's Joel. And yes, it's about time this story had a proper ending. You are contractually obligated to be my bridesmaid, so start shopping for hideous dresses." We bantered as Joel navigated the familiar yet always chaotic traffic of the city. After I hung up, Maya's final piece of news lingered in the quiet car. "Did you hear?" she'd said, her tone shifting. "Leo's getting married too." To her. I'd simply made a soft, non-committal sound. Internally, it registered as a fact no more significant than a weather report. But Joel's hand had tightened on the steering wheel for a second before he loudly declared we were late for our dress appointment and needed to focus. I let him change the subject. The past was a closed book. Vivida Bridal was an oasis of hushed luxury, all cream carpets, soft lighting, and dresses displayed like priceless artifacts. 6 months ago, in an international bridal magazine, I had seen the dress. It was the reported masterpiece of Vivida's legendary head designer, a gown they called Aria, woven with whispers of silk and dreams. It was love at first sight, a far cry from the practical, modest choices I usually made. This felt like a celebration, a claim to a beauty and joy that was entirely my own. We had an appointment, but as we approached the entrance, a shop assistant intercepted us, her face a mask of professional apology. "Could you please wait just a moment? There's a situation inside." Even through the heavy doors we could hear the raised voices. A woman's shrill and cracking with fury. "What's the big deal about a stupid dress? You're just a snob. You think I can't afford it." A calmer, strained voice tried to placate her. "Madam, this particular gown is reserved for another client. It's not a matter of, screw you. You're all the same looking down on people." The woman's voice, it tugged at a dark, distant corner of my memory. Joel instinctively stepped closer to me. Then the doors burst open, propelled by a security guard escorting a struggling, cursing woman out into the mall concourse. She was dressed in expensive but ill-fitting clothes, her hair overly styled but fraying at the edges. Her face was contorted with rage. Fiona. Time seemed to warp. She was thinner, her skin had lost its dewy, pampered glow, and fine lines were etched around her eyes and mouth. The vibrant, razor-sharp girl from the restaurant was gone, replaced by someone hardened and desperate. As she was marched past us, her tirade cut off abruptly. She saw me. Her eyes widened, the anger momentarily swallowed by pure, stunned recognition. Then they flicked over Joel, my simple but elegant clothes, the confidence in my posture, and the shock curdled into something uglier, more envious. He was here. A second figure emerged from the shop, slower, wearier. Leo. My breath didn't catch. My heart didn't skip. I simply observed him as I might a character in a play I'd seen long ago. He had put on weight, a softness around his middle that his cheap, tight-fitting suit couldn't conceal. His hair was thinning. But it was his eyes that were most changed, empty, exhausted, devoid of the sharp, calculating light or the cold arrogance. They were just tired, defeated. When his gaze landed on me, he didn't step forward. He flinched. A full-body recoil as if struck. His eyes darted from my face to Joel's protective stance beside me, then quickly down to the floor. The shop assistant scurried over to us, wringing her hands. "Miss Chen, Mr. Wu, my deepest apologies for the wait. The dress is ready for you. Please this way." I nodded, offering her a small, understanding smile. Without a second glance at the frozen tableau of my past, I took Joel's arm and let her lead us into the sanctum of the boutique. And there was. Arya was more than a dress. It was a revelation. It wasn't frothy or overly ornate. It was architectural, a cascade of ivory silk that looked like liquid moonlight, with a subtle, intricate lace overlay that hinted at Art Deco geometry. It was bold. It was me, or rather, the me I had become. I stepped into it and the skilled attendant did up the countless tiny buttons. When I turned to the mirror, I didn't see the nervous girl who'd traveled 2,000 miles with a desperate heart. I saw a woman poised, with a quiet strength in her eyes and a future she had built waiting for her. A soft clang made me turn. Joel had set his water glass down on a nearby table, his hand unsteady. He was just staring, his mouth slightly agape. His eyes, behind his glasses, were suspiciously bright. I smiled, a real, full smile that reached my eyes. "Stunned?" I asked softly. He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah," he whispered, his voice thick. "Stunned." He walked over, not touching the dress as if it were sacred. "How did I ever get so lucky?" he murmured, his gaze holding mine in the mirror. We were lost in that moment, in the quiet, overwhelming rightness of it, when the shouting from outside erupted again, piercing our bubble. "Leo, do you want to die? Do you still like her? Look at you. Look at yourself. Who else would want you but me? You think she'd even spit on you now? You owe me. You owe my family. We died together, you hear me?" Fiona's voice was hysterical, raw with a years-long bitterness. We heard the sound of flesh hitting fabric, a weak, deflected slap. Joel clicked his tongue, a sound of pure disgust, and moved instinctively to stand between me and the door, even though we were safely inside. I turned to the wide-eyed attendant. "Shouldn't someone handle that? It's bad for the ambience." The attendant snapped out of her horrified fascination and rushed out, calling for the mall security again. Through the open door we had a direct view of the concourse. Fiona was on the ground now, not from a push, but from a dramatic collapse, pounding her fists on Leo's legs as he stood, statue still, facing away from her. His shoulders were hunched as if bearing a great weight. And then he slowly, deliberately turned his head. Not to look at the weeping Fiona, but to stare directly through the open door of Vivida, his eyes locking onto the reflection in the mirror, onto Joel standing behind me, onto me in the celestial dress. His expression was unreadable. Not anger, not longing. It was the blank stare of a man looking at a life that was no longer his, a masterpiece he could never afford. Finally, as security guards approached again, he spoke, his voice low but carrying flat with utter exhaustion. "Can you stop this? Just stop." He shook his leg free from Fiona's grasp and, without helping her up, simply walked away, pushing through the small crowd of onlookers that had gathered. Fiona sat alone on the polished floor, her expensive clothes askew, her makeup streaked, staring at her empty hands. The drama was over. The crowd dispersed, whispering. She was left there, a shriveled centerpiece of her own ruined world. In that moment I didn't feel triumph. I felt a distant, profound pity. I wondered if she ever regretted it. The lies, the manipulation, the choice to tie her entire worth to a man and a father whose power was always conditional, always corrupt. I would never know. All I knew was that every choice has its consequence. Theirs had led here to the floor of a mall, in front of a bridal shop they could no longer patronize. Mine had led here to this dress, to this man. I reached back and found Joel's hand. His fingers laced through mine, warm and strong, calloused from work and real life. Our hands were a partnership, a mutual support system forged in the long years of recovery and growth. There was no one looking up, no one looking down. No frantic chasing. Just two people side by side. Perhaps this was the kind of love that was meant for me all along. Not a dazzling, distant star to worship, but a steady, warm sun to build a life under. "All right," I said, my voice clear and sure in the quiet room. I gave my reflection one last satisfied look. "This is the one." I turned to Joel, the enormity of the dress swirling around me. "Now let's go home. You owe me braised ribs to make up for the drama." Joel's face broke into a relieved, radiant smile. He leaned in, careful of the lace, and kissed my temple. "All right," he whispered, his voice full of a promise that stretched far beyond today. "Let's go home." The incident at Vivida Bridal should have felt like a grand, cinematic closure. In a way it was. Seeing Leo and Fiona, reduced, frayed, locked in their own miserable orbit, acted as a final exorcism. The last ghost of what might have been was laid to rest, not with a bang, but with the pathetic whimper of a public tantrum on a mall floor. Any lingering what-ifs dissolved into a clear certain "thank goodness that's not me." Yet in the quiet days that followed, a different kind of unease settled over me. It wasn't about them. It was about the dress. Aria, hung in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, shrouded in a protective garment bag, a silent, beautiful monument to the future. Every time I looked at it, I felt a flutter of awe, quickly followed by a pinprick of anxiety. It was too perfect. Too grand. A part of me, the girl who survived on tutoring wages and hard-seat train tickets, worried it was a jinx, that such blatant happiness was asking for trouble. Joel sensed it. He'd find me staring blankly at the bag and would wrap his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "It's just a dress, Nina," he'd murmur into my hair. "It's beautiful because you're going to be in it. If you wore a potato sack, I'd still think I was the luckiest man alive." His steadiness was my anchor. While I dealt with the surreal whirlwind of wedding planning, tastings, seating charts, negotiations with my mother over the merits of peonies versus hydrangeas, Joel was a calm harbor. He handled the tech for our digital guest book, designed our simple, elegant invitations himself, and fielded calls from his enthusiastic, slightly chaotic business partners about their speech plans. He was building our future with the same meticulous, determined care he'd used to rebuild his academic life. One afternoon, while addressing envelopes, Maya looked up at me. "You're quiet. Not getting cold feet, are you? Because I will personally hunt Joel down if he's done anything. But also, I've already bought the bridesmaid dress, so you're legally obligated." I laughed, shaking my head. "No cold feet. Not about Joel. It's just, everything feels so normal. So happy. After so many years of everything being so hard, so dramatic, it feels strange. Like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." Maya put down her pen, her expression turning serious. Listen to me. You've had your lifetime quota of drama. You paid it up front with interest. The universe doesn't get to charge you twice. This peace, this normal, boring, wonderful happiness, you earned it. So stop waiting for a shoe. There's no shoe. There's just you and a really good man and a terrifyingly expensive dress. Got it. I nodded, her words sinking in. He was right. I had to learn to accept the calm. A week before the wedding, Joel and I took a day trip to the coastal city where we decided to hold the ceremony. A small, cliffside venue with a view of the endless blue ocean. It was far from our universities, from Leo's city, from all the old scars. We were doing a final walkthrough with the coordinator. As we stood on the stone terrace where we would say our vows, the sea breeze tugging at our clothes, Joel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and silenced it. Everything okay? I asked. Oh yeah. Just work. Zhang's freaking out about a server thing. It's handled. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and took my hand. This is the spot, he said, his voice full of quiet wonder. But the moment had shifted. I'd seen the name on his screen before he'd flipped it over. It wasn't Jiang. It was an unknown number, but the area code was from Leo's hometown. I didn't ask. I chose consciously and firmly to trust him. If it was something, he would tell me. If it was nothing, I wouldn't give it the power to disrupt our peace. The old Nina might have spiraled, might have picked at the thread until the whole fabric unraveled. The new Nina squeezed his hand and pointed at a diving seabird. Look at that. It's like an omen of good fish dinners in our future. He laughed, the tension leaving his shoulders, and the moment passed. Later that evening, over a casual dinner of fresh seafood at a dockside restaurant, he brought it up himself. He put down his chopsticks, his expression sober. I got a weird call today. While we were at the venue. I said simply, dipping a shrimp in chili sauce. It was him. He didn't need to say the name. He got my number from some old university directory, I guess. He was hard to understand. Rambling. Sounded like he'd been drinking. A cold trickle, not of fear but of profound weariness, went down my spine. What did he want? Joel sighed, running a hand through his hair. To congratulate me, apparently. Then it switched to asking if I knew what I was getting into. Said you were complicated. That you held grudges. That I should be careful. He met my eyes, his gaze steady and sure. I told him he was a pathetic coward who'd thrown away the best thing that ever happened to him, and that if he ever contacted either of us again, I'd have more than just a university investigation to show him. I hung up, blocked the number, and reported it as harassment to my phone provider. The anger in his voice was protective, fierce. It didn't scare me, it warmed me. He wasn't questioning me. He was defending us. I'm sorry, I said. Don't you dare apologize, he said firmly, reaching across the table for my hand. His misery is his own. It has nothing to do with us. I wanted you to know. No secrets. No secrets. It was such a simple, profound concept. I thought of the thousands of tiny secrets I'd kept for Leo. My feelings, my hurts, my needs, all buried to preserve his fragile equilibrium. Here was Joel, handing me a potential secret on a platter, trusting me with it, trusting us with it. Thank you for telling me, I said. And I meant it. The incident, instead of being a falling shoe, became a strange reinforcement of the rightness of my choice. Leo was still trying to manipulate, to cast shadows. Joel chose to bring everything into the light. The final days before the wedding became a blissful, chaotic blur. My parents' house was filled with relatives, the air thick with the smell of festive cooking and the sound of overlapping conversations. Joel's family, smaller but just as warm, arrived. Our worlds, once so separate and fraught, were merging in a celebration of sticky rice cakes and loud laughter. The night before the wedding, the traditional Zanangsi, was a riot of my female relatives and friends. My room was packed. Maya oversaw a truly frightening array of skincare products. My aunts told increasingly embarrassing stories about me as a child. The mood was one of joyful, rambunctious anticipation. As things finally quieted down and people drifted off to sleep in every available space, Maya and I were left alone. She looked at me, her eyes soft. You ready for tomorrow, Mrs. Wu? The name sounded strange and wonderful. I think I've been ready for years, I said softly. I just didn't know what I was ready for. It suits you, you know, Maya said. This happiness. It's not just plastered on. It's in your bones now. You stand differently. I thought of the girl who used to hunch her shoulders, trying to make herself smaller, less demanding. I feel different. Good. She hugged me fiercely. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow you become the main character in a much better story. I didn't sleep much. But it wasn't the anxious, churning insomnia of the past. It was a buzzing, quiet excitement, a consciousness of being on the precipice of something immense and beautiful. As the first gray light of dawn touched the window, I rose. The house was silent. I slipped out of my room and into the living room where Arya hung in its shroud. I didn't take it out. I just stood before it in the pale light, my hand resting on the cool plastic of the garment bag. I thought not of tomorrow but of all the yesterdays that led here. The long train ride. The shattered screen. The cold office door closing. The view from an airport gate. The late-night video calls with a man who understood scars. The taste of braised ribs after a storm had passed. It was not a straight line. It was a labyrinth, and I had somehow, stumbling and wounded, found my way to the center. A soft sound made me turn. Joel's mother, a petite, kind-faced woman, stood in the doorway holding 2 steaming cups of tea. She smiled. Couldn't sleep either? I shook my head, returning her smile. He handed me a cup. "Hi, son," she said, her voice thick with emotion. For so long he was like a clenched fist. All anger, all tension. After that terrible business with his professor, we were so worried. Then he started talking about you. Her eyes shone. And slowly the fist opened. He remembered how to hope. We have you to thank for that. Tears pricked my eyes. He saved me too, I whispered. In every way that matters. She patted my arm. You saved each other. That's the best kind. She nodded toward the dress. It's beautiful. But it's just the wrapping. The gift is the life you two have already started building. Never forget that. As the sun rose properly, the house erupted into joyful chaos. Hairdressers and makeup artists arrived. My mother fluttered around, alternating between crying and issuing commands. Maya was a formidable general, coordinating the bridesmaids, managing the photographer, and ensuring I ate a few bites of congee. Then it was time. The attendants helped me into Arya. The heavy silk settled over my skin, the intricate lace whispering against my arms. As they did up the final buttons, a hush fell over the room. I turned to the full-length mirror. The woman who looked back was a stranger, and yet the most familiar version of myself I had ever seen. The dress was a masterpiece, but it didn't wear me. I wore it. My eyes, carefully made up, held a calm, deep joy. My posture was straight, my shoulders relaxed. I looked like a woman who knew what she was worth, and who had found someone who valued her exactly the same way. Maya's breath caught. "Wow," was all she said, her own eyes filling with tears. My mother simply pressed a hand to her mouth, nodding, overcome. There was a knock on the bedroom door. "The cars are here," someone called. The moment of private transformation was over. The celebration was beginning. As I gathered my bouquet of simple white orchids and greenery, I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated anticipation. I wasn't walking away from anything today. I was walking toward everything. The drive to the coastal venue was a convoy of laughter and loud music. The anxiety was gone, replaced by a bubbling, giddy energy. When we arrived, the coordinator whisked me and the bridal party into a secluded holding room with a stunning view of the ceremony terrace below. Guests were beginning to fill the seats, tiny dots of color against the vast backdrop of sea and sky. I could see Joel from the window. He stood at the front with his best man, his back to me, fidgeting with his cufflinks. Even from a distance I could see the tension in his shoulders. He was nervous. The sight made my heart swell with affection. Maya followed my gaze and grinned. He looks like he's about to face a firing squad. In a good way. There was a soft tap on the door. The coordinator peeked in. 5 minutes, Nina. Everyone ready. The bridesmaids finished their final adjustments. My father appeared, resplendent in his suit, his eyes immediately glistening when he saw me. He offered me his arm, his grip strong and reassuring. "My little girl," he said, his voice husky. "Ready, Dad? For you. Always." The music began to shift, signaling the start of the procession. One by one my bridesmaids, led by a radiant Maya, walked out of the room and down the flower-lined path. The coordinator gave me a final bright smile and a thumbs up before following them. Then it was just my father and me in the quiet room. The opening notes of my chosen processional, a gentle, modern piece on strings, not the traditional wedding march, drifted in through the open door. "This is it," my father said softly. I took a deep, steadying breath. I looked out once more at the scene. The ocean, the sky, the man waiting for me with his back turned, soon to turn and see me. I felt no fear. Only certainty. "This is it," I agreed, and my voice was steady as stone. I adjusted my grip on my bouquet, the orchids cool and smooth against my skin. "Let's go." The music swelled, a gentle cascade of strings that seemed to mimic the distant sigh of the ocean. My father's arm was solid beneath my hand, an anchor to the life that had brought me here. As we stepped from the shadow of the holding room into the brilliant open light of the cliffside path, a collective soft gasp rippled through the assembled guests before they fell into a reverent silence. I didn't see them. My vision tunneled, focused on the end of the petal-strewn aisle. On Joel. He had turned. At the first note of my processional, his best man had nudged him and he'd pivoted, his nervous fidgeting forgotten. The expression that dawned on his face as he saw me, a slow, breathtaking unfurling of pure wonder, would be etched in my memory forever. All the tension melted away, replaced by a look of such open, vulnerable joy that my own breath caught. His glasses glinted in the sun, and for a moment, I saw the red-rimmed eyes of the man who'd just defended his PhD, the determined partner who'd stood by me through the final storms. Now he was simply the man waiting for me. The walk felt both endless and instantaneous. I was aware of the smiles, the tears, Maya's beaming pride, my mother dabbing her eyes furiously. I felt the cool sea breeze play with the delicate lace of my sleeves, the weight of the silk gown, the steady, proud pace of my father. But my soul was already at the end of the aisle, locked with Joel's gaze. As we reached the front, my father lifted my hand from his arm. He pressed it gently, then placed it in Joel's waiting palm. Joel's hand was warm, slightly damp with nerves, but his grip was firm, sure. My father leaned in and whispered something to Joel I couldn't hear. Joel nodded, his throat working, and then my father stepped back to join my mother. It was just us. Under a simple arch woven with more greenery and white orchids, before the infinite blue of the sea and sky, with only the officiant, a warm-faced woman, standing slightly to the side. The officiant began to speak words about love, commitment, and chosen futures. I heard them as if through water, their meaning absorbed more through feeling than sound. I was too busy studying Joel's face, memorizing the curve of his smile, the way his thumb stroked the back of my hand. He was doing the same, his eyes tracing the lines of the dress, the flowers in my hair, finally settling on my eyes with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. "Nina and Joel have chosen to speak their own vows," the officiant said, stepping back slightly. Joel took a deep breath. He let go of my hand just long enough to fumble in his jacket pocket and pull out a folded piece of paper. His hands shook as he unfolded it. He looked down, then back up at me, and a sheepish grin broke through his nerves. "I wrote pages," he confessed, his voice a little rough. The guests chuckled softly. "I wanted to get it perfect. But looking at you now, all those words seem inadequate." He glanced at the paper, then deliberately folded it again and put it back in his pocket. He took both of my hands in his. "Nina," he began, his voice gaining strength, ringing clear in the salt air. "You walked into my life when it was a room with all the windows boarded shut. You didn't just open a door. You were the sunlight. You taught me that justice isn't just an abstract concept. It's something you fight for yourself and for others. You taught me that strength isn't about never falling but about who helps you up and who you choose to help up in return." Tears welled in my eyes, blurring his beloved face. "My vow to you is this," he continued. "I vow to be that person who helps you up always. I vow to build a home with you that is full of that sunlight, of honest work, of stupid jokes, and of braised ribs whenever you want them. I vow to look at you every day with the same wonder I feel right now because choosing you is the smartest, truest thing I have ever done. I am yours completely and gratefully." A quiet sob escaped me. I hadn't prepared written vows. I had been too afraid I would freeze. But looking at him, feeling the truth of his words sink into my bones, my own vows formed themselves, rising from a place deeper than rehearsal. "Joel," I started, my voice trembling but clear. "For so long I thought love was a distant star. Something you admired, chased, but could never truly hold. It was cold and left you lonely." I squeezed his hands. You showed me that love isn't a star. It's the ground under your feet. It's solid and warm and it holds you up. You are my safe harbor. My partner in every sense of the word. I saw his eyes shimmer. My vow to you is to always be that solid ground for you too. To celebrate your victories as my own. To face any challenge side by side, never one behind the other. To build a life that isn't about reaching some impossible summit, but about enjoying the view from wherever we are together. I vow to choose you every day with clarity and with joy. I am yours. The officiant, smiling broadly, stepped forward again. The exchange of rings was a blur of gold and trembling fingers. Then came the words we had been waiting for. By the power vested in me and before all those who love you, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Joel, you may kiss your bride. He didn't need permission. He was already leaning in. His kiss was not a theatrical performance for the crowd. It was tender, profound, a silent sealing of every promise we had just made. It tasted of salt from the sea air and the sweet promise of the future. When we finally parted, resting our foreheads together for a brief, private moment, the world erupted into cheers and applause. We turned hand in hand to face our friends and family, now husband and wife. The joy on their faces was a mirror of our own. As we began our recessional, walking back up the aisle together, the music now triumphant and joyful, Maya caught my eye and mouthed, "Told you." The reception was held in a glass-walled pavilion overlooking the same breathtaking vista. It was a celebration filled with genuine warmth. Speeches were made. Maya's was hilariously embarrassing and perfectly loving. Joel's best man, his business partner Jiang, gave a rambling, heartfelt toast about Joel's transformation from a brooding hermit to a smiling, slightly less brooding hermit with a stunning wife. We ate, we laughed, we danced. Our first dance was to a song we'd both loved but never admitted to the other. A sweet, cheesy pop ballad from our late teens. As Joel swayed with me, remarkably graceful for a man who claimed to have 2 left feet, he whispered, "No regrets." I looked around the room. At my parents dancing, at Maya trying to teach Jiang a complicated dance move, at the sea of happy, familiar faces. I looked back at my husband. "Not a single one," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Later, as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and pink, we slipped away for a moment alone. We stood on a secluded part of the cliff, the sounds of the party a happy murmur behind us. Joel wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin on my shoulder. We watched the sun sink into the sea. "It's over," I said softly, not of the day but of an era. "It's just beginning," he corrected, his voice a rumble against my back. He was right. The story of Nina and Leo, of the shattered laptop and the broken heart, was definitively, irrevocably over. It was a closed book on a high shelf. The story of Nina and Joel was Volume 1, Chapter 1, and it was being written on the wide, open pages of a shared future. We turned to go back to our party, to our people. As we walked, hand in hand, I glanced back once more at the darkening ocean. I didn't think of the past or of shoes that might drop. I thought of the vast, uncharted waters ahead, and I knew I wouldn't be navigating them alone. Think.